Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Mark Francis, your host for session 1 of CSE's series, Plant Proteins, The New Age of Food, February 4th edition. Thank you to you, all of our attendees, for tuning in, and to all those in the plant protein industry who have helped us put this series together, in particular, Scott Exner of MLT Aikens, Canada's leading ag food IP law firm, Brad Farquhar, CFO of Input Capital and Executive in Residence in Agribusiness at the Business Schools at the U of Regina, the Regina Economic Development Group, and Glenn Fraser and Leanne Mejia of MNP, and of course, Jim Harden of AVAC here in Calgary. Today we have 2 more sessions after this one, each with companies active in the space, hosted at 1 p.m. Mountain by Anil Mall and at 2 p.m. Mountain by Barrington Miller. A reminder that this smorgasbord relating to plant protein will continue on February 11th and 18th. We might just also happen to let one of the 3 sessions on the 11th deal with alternate sources, such as fungal and insect. Think manna, and you can think yum. On the February 18th, we will return to more general themes. Note our disclaimer. These presentations are for information only and are not a solicitation to make an investment in either shares or debt or to buy or sell stock. CSE and Mark Francis as session host make no representation about any of these companies. If you are interested in the investor pitch, please connect with the companies directly in order to get detailed information. Our objective in running Plant Proteins, the New Age of Food, is twofold. First, to help companies with increasing traction to gain relevant visibility, and second, to help capital markets players by introducing interesting companies, focusing on whether the product will have commercial traction and why, and also providing knowledge of trends and underlying fundamentals in the world of plant protein. For you as attendees, we do ask that you share ideas and feedback with our presenters, leads, possibly funding after due diligence, referral of someone with unique applicable expertise, or even maybe a potential strategic relationship. You can find their contact information on our, we posted on the website on this air meet toward the end. Please don't treat our presenting companies as marketing targets for services. The chat board may be utilized to ask questions, and please be clear as to whom your question is being addressed, and Trevor Pizzi will try to get to them, time constraints notwithstanding. Each company will have a 7-minute presentation with their PowerPoint. When you see my face appear, the company has 15 seconds to wrap up. After all the companies have presented, we'll move to Q&A led by agri-processing specialist Trevor Pizzi, principal of anCeres Process Solutions. Today we have as presenters Jason Getty, Pea Pro Nutrition, David Ziziak, Botaneco, and Andrew Potter, Blue Sky Hemp Ventures. So let's start with Jason Getty, President, Pea Pro Nutrition. He is co-founder and president of Pea Pro Nutrition Ltd. And brings over 25 years of business management experience to the yellow pea fractionation project, including industry and market knowledge accumulated over 17 years as director and manager of operations for LA Grain and Alberta Pulse Traders. Jason, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, everyone. As Mark mentioned, my name is Jason Getty. I'm the co-founder and president of Pea Pro Nutrition. We are intending to construct a yellow pea wet fractionation facility in Lethbridge, Alberta, to produce pea protein isolate. In the late 90s, and since the late 90s, my family has owned and operated LA Grain, which is a pulse crop handling facility in Lethbridge that you could call step 1 of a wet fractionation process. LA Grain performs primary cleaning, and we are one of just a handful of facilities in the Canadian prairies that split peas. Over the past 2 decades, we've developed relationships with a large number of farmers in southern Alberta who grow pulses and peas specifically, and those farmers continue to grow pulses due to both agronomic and economic reasons and the benefits of growing those pulse crops. So our existing businesses would ensure that we have a reliable supply of peas as the raw feedstock for our new protein facility, and the business combination will allow us to create a value chain that effectively bridges the farmers right through to the plant-based food manufacturers. We're enormous believers in pea protein isolate as a mainstay food ingredient of the future. Annual global protein consumption is projected to push 1 billion metric tons by the year 2050. Right now, we consume around 600 million metric tons, with the majority of that coming from meat and seafood. Now, obviously, the sustainability of meat and seafood, of course, has some limitations to the possibility of a production increase from either of those sources of protein. So what's been dubbed alternative proteins are expected to make up the additional 300 million metric ton shortfall of protein supply. The alternative protein industry is largely in its infancy, and it's being driven by things like this rising prevalence in restrictive diets, growing concern for animal welfare, increased consumer focus on health and wellness, and food safety and food security more recently has become more prominent, and perhaps most significantly, an increased awareness of environmental sustainability and carbon footprint. And peas in particular have a notable reduced land use, fresh water consumption, low GHG emissions when compared to conventional sources of protein, especially like those of meat and seafood. Many prominent food manufacturers have already begun to use pea protein isolate as an ingredient in the foods they produce, especially meat and dairy replacements. Some of the world's largest meat companies are recognizing the future importance of plant-based meat replacements as well, and are devoting significant resources to developing those new pea protein-based products. And every month, it seems, we are seeing more and more plant-based products show up on grocery store shelves or on restaurant menus. And pea protein specifically is often the preferred plant-based protein, as it does give food manufacturers a low-fat, low-cholesterol, relatively inexpensive protein that's GMO-free, gluten-free, lactose-free, allergen-free, and so on, making it a very label-friendly product. We will require a significant number of whole yellow peas as raw feedstock for our new protein production facility. We feel that our location in southern Alberta will give us access to what has historically been some of the highest native protein content pea production in all of Canada in southern Alberta. And that's largely due to growing conditions in southern Alberta, as they are typically optimal for high protein pea growth. In 2014, we began working on lab scale testing with the Government of Alberta's Food Processing Development Centre and Discovery Place at the University of Alberta. During that time, we learned the differences between dry fractionation and wet fractionation, the differences between protein concentrates, which are typically 50 to 65% purity of protein, versus isolates, which are 80 to 90% purity range. And ultimately, we decided that we'd want to go with the wet process to produce commercial scale pea protein isolate, as the isolate represents a more versatile ingredient for manufacturers, as it's nearly colorless, less odor, and nearly tasteless protein powder, especially when compared to its concentrate counterparts. So we worked with many experts in plant protein precipitation in both industry and academia to develop our process. We worked at the University of Minnesota, University of South Dakota, Iowa State University, and several private enterprises in both Canada and the US. And our process does include some proprietary technology and a state-of-the-art water recycling program using reverse osmosis as a wet fractionation facility. It's a very water-intensive process, and this allows us to remain consistent with sustainability values that are associated with plant-based proteins in general. We developed our process through those ongoing trials going back to 2014 and the subsequent commercial scale pilots, where we finalized our process and were able to test it using the full scale equipment that we're going to be putting into our new facility. And ultimately, we produced some samples from that and had them evaluated by third-party existing users of pea protein isolate. And they tested some things, both subjective, like the color, flavor, smell, and mouthfeel of the protein, but also the objective measurements, which are more specifically the functional properties of our protein, like the solubility, the gel formation, and emulsification. And at the conclusion of the testing, we were happy to have positive results, gained a lot of confidence in the products that we could produce and the functionality that they would have, and that we would prove competitive with existing pea protein isolates on the market. We are in our financing round and are effectively ready to commence construction in Lethbridge. We'll be constructing in the industrial park of Lethbridge, which provides some higher service utilities that are required compared to our primary processing facility, which is in a rural area just south of town. Please certainly feel free to reach out to me if you, through the session, moderators or coordinators, if you'd like more information on our project. But ultimately, we're really excited about our project. We have a high growth industry for plant-based proteins with really good market penetration already for pea protein specifically, with a number of products coming in that are using pea protein as their primary ingredient, and an industry that's largely in its infancy. We believe that we're positioned in an ideal location for reliable high protein pea production, and have had a relatively early start with our R&D and feasibility review, and getting to a place where we'll be in production when demand for pea protein isolate really takes off. More broadly, we're extremely excited about the emergence of pea protein as a food ingredient and see an enormous role for it in the future of food production. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to our moderators and Mark, and happy to answer any questions thereafter.
Thank you, Jason. And now we will go with David Ziziak, COO since April 2019 of Botaneco. David grew up on a family farm, grain farm in Dauphin, Manitoba, graduated from the University of Manitoba with an agriculture BSc in plant science and economics, and enjoyed a 38-year career with Dow AgroSciences with experience in sales management, marketing management, and global business leadership in the canola and oilseeds group. David served on the board and as chair of the Canola Council of Canada, and was involved in the design of the winning application for the Protein Industries Canada Supercluster, and currently serves on the PIC board. David?
Okay, thank you, Mark. Let's get this up. Thanks very much for the introduction, and I'd like to thank the CSE for the opportunity to participate here today. So Botaneco is about creating new ingredients from traditional oilseed crops. Diets are changing around the world, creating new market opportunities for new high-value co-products, and Botaneco really wants to be a part of that trend. If we quickly take a look at the traditional sort of canola and oilseed processing industry, it's I kind of jokingly referred to it as a tradition unhampered by progress, albeit that industry is a very important part of Canadian agriculture, and they do a great job. But the business model there is really focused around extracting commodity veg oil for food and leaving behind sort of a lower value protein meal, and the majority of that, in the case of canola, goes into a low value market like dairy cattle. And what we've done at Botaneco is really reimagined how we could do this. So we've created a way to take those same oil seeds and really create new value from them. And we've created a new manufacturing technology platform based around some proprietary technologies. So we can take high oil crops like canola, sunflower, or safflower, or hemp, and we developed a new aqueous-based, water-based, a novel processing technology platform. And so instead of crushing the seed and pressing out the oil, we actually take the seed apart, we disassemble it. And from that, we can isolate and purify its sort of major components. And so we make novel co-products like oleosomes instead of liquid oil. And we can make protein concentrates and protein isolates instead of making a conventional feed meal. And that gets us into new high-value markets. So the markets that we're targeting, again, as I just mentioned, is around aquaculture feed. It's an $8 billion market that's growing, and the industry is really after new protein ingredients. Traditionally, they use something like fish meal, which is very fixed in its supply, but demand is growing. And canola has a great fit within that space. Plant-based food is our next major target, and that's where we can take our oleosomes and take our plant proteins. With the generation change in diet pattern, it's a diet pattern change for life. And so people are wanting to eat healthier. They're paying more attention to how their food is produced, seeking more sustainable production methodologies, and plant proteins fit that very well. In the course of the last 2-3 years, the North American plant-based food industry has expanded from some $3 billion to over $5 billion in value. in the course of the next 5 or 6 years, the global plant protein market value for the ingredients would be in the range of $10 to $15 billion. And canola has a great fit, but really hasn't been produced. And we hope to be an important supplier into that category. Our third vertical that we're targeting is personal care. And this is a business that we're in today. In the course of the last year, we've managed to double sales. And we can take our oleosomes, which are the fat oil bodies from inside the seeds. And these are very powerful natural emulsifiers. And they work very well in sun care and skin care kind of lotion type products. And our main target here is around sun care. And so we can provide, by loading the SPF chemistries into the oleosomes, we can actually reduce the amount of SPF chemical needed by some 30 to 50%. And that allows for a much greater skin sensory experience. So these are very light formulations. They're non-greasy, they're not heavy, they don't stay white on your skin after application. And we can improve the environmental safety and human safety by reducing the chemical load. And again, this is over an $8 billion market globally, and we can really bring, we believe, some great advantages into these formulations. So if we take a look at the economics of what we can do in terms of our value generation. So to begin with, we are creating a new adjacent space to the conventional oilseed processing industry. So we're not going to compete with the Cargills, the ADM, the Bunge's, the Richardsons, etc. And if we take a look at a business case, say of taking 100,000 metric tons of canola, if you were to put that through a conventional processing plant, you would generate about $64 million of revenue. And typically in that industry, margins are less than about 5%. But using the Botaneco process, because we can make new products that are going into new high-value markets, we really create a lot of additional revenue. In fact, we would generate from that same 100,000 tons of seed over 3 times the revenue. So instead of $65 million, you're creating $190 million of revenue, and with over 10 times better margin. So something that would approximate a 45 to a 50% kind of a margin structure. And so again, we're making new co-products, making oleosomes that sell for 3 times the value of liquid veg oil. We can make protein concentrates, protein isolates, and feed meal. So again, this allows us, our process allows us to make new co-products with higher price points, going into higher value growth markets with superior margin and return metrics as compared with the conventional industry. So where we're at today is that we have a 2,000-ton plant here in Calgary. It's a small facility, but it is a commercial facility, and the facility is highly automated, and that has allowed us to greatly de-risk the scale-up in the manufacturing technology. And so our next move is to create probably a plant that's about 100 times the size that will let us go into aquaculture feed and let us go into the food ingredient industry. And again, with the technology and with the process work that we've done, this scale-up step we feel is we're quite confident around, and that is an ambition of ours to take place within the course of the next 2 years. We've also been a beneficiary of the Supercluster program with the Protein Industries Canada. And again, Protein Industries Canada is really about accelerating the growth of the plant protein industry across Canada. We're fortunate to be a beneficiary of that program. We've received a $4 million co-investment from PIC. And Botaneco is also currently in a $20 million equity raise for growth capital to let us achieve our next set of milestones here. So to wrap up, we believe that Botaneco really represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really change how we process oil seeds. Again, bringing new technology that allows us to take these conventional crops into new, higher value markets globally. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And now, Andrew Potter, CEO, Blue Sky Hemp Ventures. Most recently, Andrew was VP of Strategic Planning and Corporate Strategy at Cenovus Energy, and prior to that, Managing Director of Equity Research at CIBC World Markets. Andrew, it's all yours.
All right, well, I'll get going here. For some reason, I'm going to have some problems sharing the screen all of a sudden. It did work before, but I will just carry on with the presentation. It'll probably take too long to fix, but Anyways, thank you everybody for your time today. Just quickly walk through the Blue Sky story. So Blue Sky was founded in 2017. And really what we saw as a founding group was an opportunity to lever industrial hemp into and really tap into three main macro themes in the market. One of the first opportunities we saw is a strong trend in consumer preference for natural medicines and natural and nutraceutical products. If you know anything about industrial hemp, you know that CBD is a very valuable part of the hemp plant. Second main trend that we saw that we wanted to tap into with industrial hemp was obviously the move towards hemp or plant-based proteins, which is why many of us are here today. And then the third trend that we really saw a good fit with for industrial hemp was, general movement towards sustainability and carbon neutrality. One of the really neat things about industrial hemp is that it can absorb very, very large amounts of CO2. And if it's properly processed and handled, most of that CO2 can be sequestered. So allowing us to execute our business model potentially with a carbon negative footprint. So what I'm showing here is just what our business model is. And again, I think this is a very unique business model. So Blue Sky, we founded the whole company around this concept of full plant utilization. And I'll just dive into that a little bit, give you a bit more context. But really what we're meaning is that, when you look at the industrial hemp plant, there's three main value chains that you can pursue. The first is the food value chain. And what I'm meaning there is we're taking the hemp grain and turning that into a variety of superfood products. So Blue Sky today, out of our facility in Saskatoon, we're producing hulled hemp, or better known as hemp hearts, different degrees of protein concentrates in that 33 to 50% range, and hemp seed oil. In the near future, we do hope to be offering a higher protein concentrate, something in that 70 to 80% range. So that's the first step of the Blue Sky's business plan. We have that up and running today. The second step of this whole plant utilization model is monetizing the flower of the plant. So for those that don't know, the flower and the leaves of the hemp plant are what holds the CBD. So that is a very lucrative market. If you don't know, the quick story on CBD is it's being touted as a very effective natural remedy for anything ranging from anxiety, depression, pain relief, and even use as a sleep aid. Today, that's in North America, give or take about a $3 billion market, expected to grow to about $25 billion, to be a $25 billion market in the next 3 to 4 years. So significant growth from the CBD. So again, just to recap, we've got the grain value chain, the infrastructure in place for that. We've just started producing CBD a couple months ago. And the third part of the whole plant business utilization model is what we're just starting to turn our attention to. And that's how do you take the stock of the plant and turn that into useful industrial products. I won't go into a lot of detail today, but the short story is that the hemp plant, the natural fibers, have a wide range of use in sustainable industrial products. And by turning those fibers into sustainable products, we are actually sequestering CO2. So just to come back to it again, Blue Sky is a very different model. It's focused on whole plant utilization. And I guess the main question you might be asking is, why go through this model? And really it comes down to establishing ourselves as the low cost producer. Essentially what we're doing is we're working with our farming group. We pay something along the lines of a flat rate per acre. We collect all the biomass that comes off those acres. So the more homes we can find, or the more ways we can find to monetize those products, the lower our cost inputs are into each one of those value chains, which does position us as a sustainable cost leader. Maybe we'll jump to the next slide. Just very quickly, I'll touch on this. This is one of Blue Sky's main innovations, and what's really allowed us to unlock this concept of whole plant utilization. So this is a schematic of our process that we call reduced flower and leaf. But the very short story here is we can take broadacre farmed industrial hemp plant, we can take the whole plant, we can take topped material, we can take chaff, and put it through our RFL process. The very short story is what this does is it separates out the grain, which again we can send to our facility in Saskatoon to convert into superfoods. It sorts out the small bits and the large bits of fiber that we can, again, that's the next phase of the business plan where we can turn those into industrial products. And the big prize today is that this process also allows us to sift out and concentrate the reduced flower and leaves, which is the feedstock for our CBD extraction. But this unique process, one of the things that it does is it allows it to really concentrate the potency or increase the potency of that RFL material, which makes for far more efficient CBD extraction. Just jump to the next slide. So I'll just talk a little bit more about the hemp food business. So again, this was the first leg of our business plan. We got this up and running in 2018. And I think truly hemp superfoods are underappreciated in the market. They have a ton of great attributes, including a really strong omega profile, very digestible proteins, and one of the most complete amino acid profiles. So today, Blue Sky, as I mentioned before, we're producing hemp hearts, hemp seed oil, and some basic protein powders. But we do expect to be coming to market in spring, summer of 2021 with a variety of differentiated hemp food products. One of the main barriers to seeing more widespread adoption of hemp foods or hemp superfoods really comes down to price. And I should have mentioned this earlier. The market for hemp foods in North America, it's only about a $400 million a year market. So really in the big scheme of food products, this is a true niche product. Our goal as a company is to really help industrial hemp break out of that niche and launch it on a stronger growth trajectory. And again, a lot of that is just solving the price problem. If you look at the retail price of whether you're looking at protein powder or hulled hemp, give or take, you're paying $13, $14 a pound for this product. We believe with our business model, we can deliver a higher quality product. In fact, we've proven we can deliver a higher quality product at a substantial cost reduction. With the next stage of our business plan, we expect to see another step change down in terms of what we can offer a product for. I see that we're running short on time, so I will just wrap it up there. I appreciate your time and just want to emphasize the point that we really believe that we've developed something unique with Blue Sky that offers investors exposure to a high quality, high growth, and socially conscious investment, which is really a rare combination. But again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. And now we will have all of our panelists for the Inquisition with our question moderator, Trevor Pizzi, President of anCeres Processing Solutions, a Calgary-based engineering and project management firm with subject matter expertise in grain processing, optimizing clients' existing operations, navigating the regulatory environment, and facilitating capital investment in new assets. He's passionate about helping Western Canadian small and medium-sized agribusiness feed the world. Raised on a pedigreed seed farm in Western Manitoba, BSc in engineering from University of Manitoba, and previously led Viterra's $1 billion North American food ingredients manufacturing portfolio. Thank you for joining us today, Trevor.
Thank you. Well, that was a bunch of very interesting information from three really, really interesting companies that are on a strong growth trajectory. So maybe I could start by just asking all of you, and Andrew, if you want to respond to this question first. You've all had some success, obviously, in raising capital to date, but there's always challenges in that space. So what is the biggest attractant that you see for investors looking at this plant protein space, and what are the most significant risks that you're hearing feedback from them on as to why they're maybe reluctant to invest in plant proteins yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think our perspective might be quite different. Industrial hemp is quite a different protein source. The biggest challenge that we see just from an investor perspective is lack of familiarity with industrial hemp as a food source. Most investors have heard of hemp for the purposes of CBD, but it takes an awful lot of education to really tell the story about the food side, and that is also a very compelling opportunity. But that same challenge has also been an opportunity for those that are willing to spend the time on it. It's attracted a lot of attention and very devoted investors.
David, I was just wondering if you had something to add to that perspective on challenges of raising capital.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. I think what's attractive is that you've got this large global industry. And again, we've got a change in diet pattern. People are going to eat differently, and they're going to eat differently forever. So you've got, it's not a fad, it really is something fundamental in how we're going to eat. And it's an area in Canada that's underinvested in. It's a very nascent industry. It's just on the verge of beginning to take shape. And that makes it very attractive. I think one of the greater challenges we've run across is that not a lot of investors really understand the ag food industry in Canada. There certainly are firms out there, but a lot of people that we speak with, it's a brand new and different space. It hasn't been a traditional avenue for investment for private equity or private capital in the Canadian context anyway. And so there's a lot of education that has to happen to help people get comfortable with all these fundamentals.
Thanks, Jason. You're looking for capital investment to build a facility. Is that similar to what you're hearing from investors as well?
Yes, thank you. I think David and Andrew answered very similar as I would have done, but from an attraction standpoint, certainly the carbon footprint and environmental sustainability aspect of plant proteins is really the main driving force behind everything, with some of the smaller ones being, growing concern for animal welfare and so on. But from a risk perspective, I think the traditional perceived risks like process risk and construction risk and market risk and how fast is the market going to grow, I think most would agree that this market is for real and emerging at a very quick pace. But I think all of those risks are perhaps heightened as it's relatively new, a new industry. And like David mentioned, I think there's a lot, and Andrew did as well, a lot of education that has to happen on the investment side to kind of get everyone comfortable with those perceived risks, what we can do to mitigate those risks and really take this industry off.
Good. Thanks, guys. Andrew, would you mind speaking a little bit about, I know that some of the products, particularly on the CBD side that you are involved with, have fairly extensive regulatory process before you can move forward with marketing them. So can you give us a sense of kind of how critical it is to be involved in understanding that regulatory process, and how much time should companies that are considering these new and novel market entries, how much time should they plan on getting through that process before they can go to market?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and very different stories on our food side of the business versus our CBD side of the business. But on the CBD side of the business, I can tell you that going through the Health Canada regulatory process was an absolute nightmare. It was probably about a 2-year process from start to finish. The regulations changed several times along the way, so no matter how prepared you were going in, you still had to be ready for pretty dramatic changes along the way. So yeah, I mean, it's not sure what advice I can really give people to handle that process better. It is just a challenging process. And for those that don't know, with regard to the licensing process for CBD in Health Canada, it's very different than anything else you've probably seen, where you actually have to engineer and fully build, fully equip your facility, have all the key staff in place before you actually submit your application. So you've spent millions and millions of dollars, you've got people on the payroll, and then after you have that facility built, in our case anyways, it was still another 8 months before we actually got our license approval. So I'd caution anybody going in looking at the CBD space, make sure you're very well capitalized and that you can control that burn rate, because you really are at the mercy for Health Canada. And there still is the risk that they actually come back and require significant modifications to your facility or don't approve your license at all. The food side of the business was nowhere near that challenge. I mean, it was still a challenge, to be fair, but at least the roadmap in terms of getting your GFSI certification, if you want to go that route, at least there's a pretty commonly understood roadmap. Lots of external resources to draw on. Whereas the CBD side, I mean, it's just so new that you really are on your own in that process. Okay.
Kind of keeping on that market entry theme then, David, I know that Botaneco has done a lot of work and published results of trials you've conducted on the efficacy of your canola protein in aquaculture feeds. How much time and effort kind of goes into that type of trial work, and how critical are those type of results to allowing you to reach commercialization of your technology?
Yeah, thank you. Doing those sorts of trials are very important. We're bringing in a new feed ingredient into a very sophisticated industry. And so salmon and shrimp have got a lot of very sophisticated animal nutrition attached to it. And so we really need to be able to demonstrate that we could come into the ration at a high level and animals would perform well. Historically, canola has not been a great ingredient in aquaculture because of a lot of the anti-nutritional factors and extra fiber. So when you're making something new and bringing it in, it was a really important part of validating our story and our benefit statements. And the process took about a year by the time you actually start the trial, get it all done, get everything written up, get your results back. And so, yeah, it's a critical piece.
And Jason, on your end, maybe on the market entry side there, you mentioned in your presentation that you've done a lot of pilot plant evaluation work to give you a sense of the product suitability for various applications. Is that, like, on the food side, is it a similar importance to be able to establish markets in these relatively novel ingredients like pea protein isolates?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's very early stage, obviously, and I think some of the prominent food manufacturers that we've seen that have been able to commercialize their products early on, each of them have their own secret recipe per se, and each of them have different requirements for what sort of functional properties they want from the protein. I mean, we will produce a native protein, but then the next step from there are denaturing through enzyme treatment or heat treatment, hydrolyzing the protein, and each of those different treatments will change the functional properties of it, making it more suitable for solubility in a beverage or gel formation or emulsification or what have you. So I think the ability to serve all of those markets as everything continues to evolve is going to be really important.
I'm interested as well in some of the manufacturing and processing aspects of your business. So, Andrew, you had mentioned this full plant utilization, but obviously all these different components come out at a certain ratio relative to each other. And how challenging is it to be able to take and have a process that produces these different products and find that balance to match the market demand? Or is your process flexible enough to change the extraction rates that you're getting for the different products?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, the short answer, especially in the early days, this was a huge challenge. When we got our first value chain on, which was just the food production side, especially the oil and protein component, what we were finding is that, when hemp seed oil was in favor and everybody wanted hemp seed oil, nobody wanted to touch protein, and vice versa. And when you're in those early startup stages, that's a big challenge because you just can't afford to sit on large inventory and tie up working capital like that. Now that we've got both the food and CBD value chains on and more established margins, it's a lot easier to absorb those different production rates. You can afford to sit on inventory a little bit longer. But over the last 2 years as well, we've really been thinking very creatively in terms of opening up new markets. So as an example, if hemp protein is out of favor, we found some compelling ways of monetizing hemp meal into reasonable valued markets, to kind of ease that pain. But, I love our model of whole plant utilization. It does add a lot of value, but it absolutely does come with some complexities.
David, on Botaneco's side, I get the sense that you have some similarities. Like, a lot of companies in this space really focus on a single commodity, but Botaneco has a process that allows you to deal with multiple commodities. Are those processes similar enough, or what's the trade-off kind of between process efficiency and, the high throughput that would come from focusing on a single commodity?
That's a good point, Trevor. Certainly in the past, plants have been kind of dedicated into processing a single crop. So one of the advantages that our process has is that it can be applied across 3 or 4 different major oilseed crops. But the equipment stays the same. We might change the operating conditions within each of those different pieces of equipment, but we can essentially use all the same know-how and equipment train to multiple, whether we're processing canola or sunflower or a crop like hemp.
Maybe one last question then for Jason. everybody talked about sustainability, and water seemed to be a key piece of that. Can you mention or speak to kind of how critical water infrastructure and wastewater infrastructure is to where some of these facilities are being built in Western Canada?
For sure. I think, the biggest part of it is that, well, first of all, there's a very high water use during the precipitation and extraction phase, in particular for our wet fractionation process, and that water is imperative, and obviously we're using a lot of it. So the RO system that we're putting in is intended to recycle over 80% of that water, in combination with an evaporator that will reduce our COD and BOD amounts in our wastewater to under like 1% of the city allowances for that. So on a bigger picture, it's important for us to have that, not just to reduce costs, but obviously to be consistent as well with the values that are associated with plant proteins in general, and the sustainability of the product. So that's the biggest reason.
Perfect, thank you. Andrew, just one last question. The others had mentioned their interest in raising capital at this point. Are you also in a capital raise situation, or are you adequately funded already?
For the moment, we are adequately funded to continue to execute. Again, getting our CBD operation online was absolutely pivotal to generating positive cash. But that said, we are looking at a number of projects that we are going to want to scale up over the probably next 6 to 12 months, and maybe coming back to the market for capital at that point.
Great, thank you. So really wonderful information, presentations from all of you. I appreciate the additional insight that we got after your presentations. I'll turn it back over to Mark now.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Excellent job. And thank you to you, our presenters. We've been delighted to have all three of you: Jason Getty, Pea Pro Nutrition, David Ziziak, Botaneco, and Andrew Potter, Blue Sky Hemp Ventures. And may you have continued success in expanding your businesses. Thank you to our attendees for your time today. Go to the company websites and learn more about these companies. If you have a lead for them, do connect. The next session will begin at 1 p.m. Mountain with Anil Mall hosting, I believe, Plant & Co., PlantX, and Organic Garage. In the meantime, on this platform, you'll notice that with the Air Meet, you can go out into the hall and choose to sit at tables to chat with others and compare notes. So perhaps our presenters as well for the next 10 or 15 minutes might go out into the hall and sit at some tables. You actually have to sit at a table, and then you will appear and the other people at the table will appear, and you can have a discussion. So thank you very much, and come back to Showtime at 1 p.m.